On the outskirts of West Olympia, natural springs bubble to the surface of several streams and ponds close to the shores of Eld Inlet. Historically, Allison Springs flowed into adjacent Mud Bay, and the site was likely rich in wildlife diversity. The mixing of spring and tidal waters was prime habitat for salmon and other native species. But the property was altered over 60 years ago. Roads and structures were built, artificial ponds, culverts, and dams were constructed. The site was used as a U-catch trout farm, a fish hatchery, and for fish tagging research, among other things. By 1999, the site was no longer in use, but the structures remained, impeding tidal exchange and disrupting the potential function of the estuary. Though not owners of the property, the Capital Land Trust applied for and received grants from several sources to restore the area to a natural estuary.
The Randall property is immediately adjacent to the City of Olympia's Allison Springs property. And we've been working on restoration efforts on the Randall property for over 15 years.
Estuaries are kind of at the edge. They're at the edge of the fresh water pouring into the salt water and at the edge of the tidal cycle moving back and forth. And so edges are always very rich places for diversity.
Southern Puget Sound is probably the most richest natural shellfish producing area in the state of Washington. That was one of the things that probably drew our ancestors there to have that year-round food supply. Our family is from Eld Inlet. My brother took over the property that my grandfather had. He's still in the oyster business, just like my grandfather was. Even at the time of settlement, our family was harvesting oysters and clams and selling them to the settlers that were coming in.
In our original strategic plan, we identified as one of our top priorities conservation of Puget Sound's marine shorelines and estuarine habitats. That's because these areas are so unique. They are one of the most productive living systems on Earth. And so within that, we identified several specific geographic areas, and Lower Eld Inlet was one of those top priorities.
With funding from the Washington Recreation and Conservation Office, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the State Department of Ecology, restoration of Allison Springs began in August 2011. There were plenty of obstacles.
Well, basically, we're going to be transforming the habitat from this artificially impounded freshwater pond back to more what it was historically, with more tidal influence, and these newts and amphibians can't live too well in that tidal environment. So we feel committed to rescue these guys and put them somewhere where they can flourish before the project goes forward.
Even though we're making room for another species, that is chum salmon, that can come in here and spawn, and maybe other salmon as well, we don't want to harm the species that are living here, which in this case are these newts.
Over 700 rough-skinned newts were removed and relocated that summer day.
We will remove the cement out of these pools, and the dikes that form these pools will be breached in several spots to allow the salt water to flow into this area during high tides. We'll also place some spawning gravel and large woody debris, which is trees that still have their roots on them, and we'll place them strategically around here, and that provides really important habitat for young salmon that have hatched and need refugia as they travel out into the bay.
Volunteers removed brush and planted seedlings at Allison Springs and the adjacent Randall property. The restoration work finished on schedule, and in early November, things started happening.
That is amazing. And there must be 50, 60, or 100 in there.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And the fact that it happened so quickly, you know, we had the dam's been out for, 2 months, you know, and it's full of salmon.
We're just seeing hundreds of fish, and their backs are all out of the water, and they're all flipping around and splashing. And they look like they're really finding what they need here. Every year when there were ponds with intake and outlet pipes in them, the fish were actually trying to get through the pipes, and they would find a couple every year. So this run knew to come back here, but they just weren't able to because they were blocked by these created pools with the barriers. So some part of this run had it, in their genetics to come back here. So it made sense once we opened it up that they wanted to use all this habitat.
Really, with salmon restoration, if you provide access and you provide spawning gravel, they will reproduce. That's all it takes. We'll never get back to, pre-European habitat conditions, but what this project shows is that a little bit of habitat restoration can go a long ways. And it's very hopeful because if we can, like the Land Trust has done, protect these special places, there is a hope that we will have salmon in perpetuity.
We understand the connection that we have with the ecosystem, and we just need to, hopefully take care of some of the habitat that's out there, and the Land Trust is a good partner to be able to help us do that.